The Nintendo 64, Nintendo's foray into the world of 3D gaming. This was my first gaming console. I was around 7 years old when my family first got one. The two first games I ever played were F1 Grand Prix and Gex. Mario Kart 64 was a game I remember also sinking a ton of time into back in those days. Super Smash Bros. As well. And that's what this video is all about, celebrating 10 games on the N64 that are very special to me. The criteria for this list is that I played these games heavily in the N64's active era and still love them today. Simple as that. If I were to make an objective top 10 that analyzed games on a deeper level, that would be a very different list. This is all about memories, nostalgia, and continued engagement. Unless otherwise stated, the footage you'll see will come from my RGB modded N64 using the RetroTink 5X Pro as well. Let's get started with number 10. Hot Wheels. Man, that was such a big part of my childhood. I had a huge collection of Hot Wheels cars. I was also the perfect target age for the 35th anniversary of the franchise, which featured a movie and tie-in game, though this was years after playing Turbo Racing here. Point is, I loved Hot Wheels, and thus played a ton of this game. Hot Wheels Turbo Racing is kind of like F-Zero, also featuring loops and twists based off of the toy sets. That makes for a fun fantasy element, which I've always preferred for racing games, maybe due to playing this so much as a kid. I've never been much for racing sims. In addition to navigating all the crazy tracks, you perform stunts to build turbocharges. Taking risks with wilder stunts rewards more turbo, so it becomes very satisfying to land those riskier attempts. There are a lot of different cars you can choose from, each with different stats spread across durability, speed, and stunt ability. There are also two elite unlockable cars, the Twin Mills, which have essentially maxed out stats. I have fond memories of watching my brother play this game in an attempt to beat those cars, finally doing so and unlocking them. One thing I never knew as a kid was that the PS1 version was so superior, featuring more tracks, both literally and for the music score. I did have a very short video on that a few years back on the channel going over the PS1 version. The other thing that kept me interested in playing this is how you unlock the cars. Some are unlocked by completing championships, but many are found in secret spots during races. There's kind of this adventure aspect to the game, encouraging exploration, and I love that aspect of it as a kid. It was so fun to come across some new secret car. No better motivation for playing than having something to work toward. Take notes, Smash 4, Hot Wheels. Beat you on that. Gex Enter the Gecko, one of the first N64 games I ever played. Gex was one of those attempts at creating the next big mascot character, to rival the likes of Mario, Sonic, and Chester the Cheetah. Good luck overthrowing the Cheddar God. Much like with Hot Wheels, Gex was also on PS1, and that version is pretty superior by comparison, featuring more levels, but more importantly, more quips. There are hundreds of lines that Gex spouts randomly throughout the game, and that number was cut drastically for the N64 version. As a kid, I legit didn't even get most of the references that Gex would make. Like, obviously when he made a silly voice, I'd find that funny, but the references themselves were almost always lost on me. Now as an adult, most of them I get, and there have been a couple that I've found genuinely funny. Comedian Dana Gould provides the voice for Gex here in the US release version, and fun fact, there is a Family Guy episode where Dana appears as himself on screen. I won't tell you which, go look for it, you'll find it eventually. Back to Gex, the game functions mostly as a clone to Super Mario 64, featuring an overworld where you jump into levels, grabbing the MacGuffin, which are remotes in this case, and returning to rinse and repeat. The levels are themed after television genres, such as horror, cartoon, martial arts, space, and so on. Gex will also wear themed costumes for some of these, but not all. I remember it taking me years of on and off play to beat this game. It's not that it is difficult, the main issue is the control and the camera. The game was developed primarily for PS1. That's my theory, given for what follows here. It came out 1 year after the first DualShock controller was released, and thus you'd think it would support that, but not really. The movement in the game is locked to 8 directions, even when you use a DualShock, which has an analog stick, like the N64 also had. This limits your precise control. It wouldn't be that bad if not for the camera. The camera will sometimes snap around to unfavorable positions, or just not follow at an optimal angle, leading to confusion and death. It makes tracking your position in 3D space so difficult. That said, I still enjoy this game. It's mainly fueled by nostalgia, as this game was one I played on and off for years, finally beating after countless attempts. That is the source of also one of my most powerful gaming memories, having my parents watch me play and finally beating the Mecha Res boss. Gex is coming back via a limited run release. I'll be sure to grab a copy, looking forward to experiencing it all over again. This was one that I kind of let slip from memory, but it all came flooding back when I popped this one in on a stream recently. My brother would play this game all the time throughout our youth, and I would mostly watch him as he tore through and unlocked everything, but I would also play it from time to time, both against him and solo. I'm not usually a fan of sports, but this game is so damn fun. It's a shame that this franchise hasn't experienced anything new, other than Excitebots on the Wii, because they nailed this one. Excitebike 64 carries with it the spirit of the original, but creates its own unique and enhanced experience. Excitebike 64 has some of the original staples, such as engine heat and taking out opponents via strategic collisions, but adds more strategy and skills by actually trying to be a serious motocross game. Compare this to any other serious motocross game of the time, and it has a lot to offer. You can't compare Mario Kart to Forza. One is a fun arcade game, the other is a serious sim. Excitebike carves out a middle point by staying true to the original, but being technical enough to attract the attention of those who actually care about the sport. I just find that so interesting. It's not some crazy, goofy, flashy thing, it's actually pretty serious overall, yet it's fun as hell. Nailing sections by properly landing into the next series of jumps is so satisfying. Excitebike 64 has a lot to offer. It's pretty impressive. There are tons of tracks, broken up between stadiums that use professionally designed motocross tracks to outdoor, longer, rally-type tracks that add a mild arcadey element to the experience. There's also a 3D version of the original game, plus spin-off modes like a hill climb event, and you can even make custom tracks. You can pick between riders, all who have different stats, the first pick being good old Jumpin' Jim from the original. You can even customize the bike jersey and colors. That's a neat bonus. There is so much going on here, it's crazy. Give it a shot, because this is definitely a hidden gem on the N64. Where Gex was an imitator of Mario 64, Banjo Kazooie innovated. The main difference in how Banjo operates as a so-called collectathon is that you can 100% a world upon entry. Mario 64 will only let you get at most 2 stars at once, one of those 2 being the 100 coin star. This is ironically something that Mario would eventually change, with Odyssey and Bowser's Fury both featuring sprawling levels that have multiple active objectives. You don't get blasted back to an overworld in those games. Back to Banjo though. Banjo Kazooie is a platformer by Rare, in which you play as the iconic bear and bird duo as they trek through the evil witch Grantoda's castle to rescue Banjo's little sister. Banjo and Kazooie have to collect notes and jiggies in order to pass locked doors and open up more of the worlds to explore. The levels you journey through to collect these are massive and feature excellent music, easily some of the best of the era. There are also tons of cool platforming moves and abilities, which include flight, it's always so fun, and transformations, which gets you excited for what awaits you in each level. This was a game that I got pretty late in my ownership of the N64, not long before getting a GameCube, and I never beat it back then. I came back to it a few years later and was able to finally complete it and see the ending. I also enjoyed playing it anew when it came to the Xbox One. Here's hoping that Banjo-Kazooie get a proper 3rd title someday, as it was very exciting to see them to come back and smash. We can only hope. This is a game I loved as a kid, but didn't really get until I was older. Yoshi's Story was the next in the Yoshi saga after the acclaimed Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island, and compared to its predecessor, there are some returning features, but largely this is a left turn. It is still a platformer, and Yoshi still swallows enemies and throws eggs. There's also a unique art style to the game. The previous entry had a colored pencil or stencil art style. Yoshi's Story adopts a Craftworks paper kind of look. It's all about the newborn Yoshis going after baby Bowser, who has stolen the super happy tree. The setup is a familiar, silly cuteness, but the execution is where things get different. As you navigate the levels, you'll find that it's not about getting to the end, it's about consuming fruit. On consuming 30 fruits, the level is complete. You only get to choose from one level if you collected enough hearts in the previous stage. There are 6 stages, each with 4 levels, but you only get to go through one level per stage. For the longest time as a kid, I was playing the exact 6 levels because I wasn't collecting or finding the hearts. The option 1 levels in each stage are fairly easy, where the option 3 and 4 ones can be shockingly difficult. This is where I started to appreciate the game more. The first options are basically baby mode, where the latter options are crushingly hard by comparison, and are so much more challenging and fun because of that. Suddenly collecting fruit becomes a nightmare as you beg to get that 5 to go warning, suffering through the Piranha Grove. Given that you only play through one level per stage, it means that this is the kind of game you go through multiple times, very similar to something like, say, Star Fox. One loop only takes about an hour or so, far less if you're speeding through. As you play, you may fall into the occasional pit or lose all your health, and this is where things get scary. You get a game over screen where your Yoshi of choice is carted off to an evil castle prison. This imagery freaked me out as a kid. Not all is lost though. If you can find a white Shy Guy, they'll rescue your captured Yoshi, functioning as a one-up of sorts. There are also 2 unlockable Yoshis, a black one and a white one. These special Yoshis have more damaging eggs and can eat any type of fruit or enemy, including ones that would normally poison a regular Yoshi. I remember reading this online, that there were other unlockable Yoshis like purple and gold, but these were all lies. It was pretty common to come across false info in forums and such back then. I remember finding similarly false info for games like Mario Kart and Mario 64. Yoshi's Story comes across as a simple, cutesy nonsense game, but give it a shot and go for those harder levels. It becomes surprisingly challenging and a fun platformer. A licensed superhero game, usually a recipe for disaster, until recently. Although we were blessed with the Rocksteady Arkham Batman games, and later the Insomniac Spider-Man games, bear in mind that prior to all that, usually these kind of games would be pretty middling. Before the licensed game Dark Ages of the mid-2000s though, we had Neversoft delivering a very good Spider-Man game for the N64 and PS1. I remember renting this game on a couple of occasions as a kid, but wouldn't own it until my late teens. Something I love about the game is the surprising depth for the era, and a variety in the levels. As you start, you can swing between buildings, climb on walls, attack opponents, both with strikes and web attacks. The controls are a little tricky regarding the web moves, but it is easy to trap opponents. After getting a feel for the basics, you're then thrust into kind of a stealth rescue scenario. There's a dedicated button for zipping to the ceiling, where you can observe and strike at your enemies, or just web them up from above. This sequence in particular is so fun to me. I could replay it anytime. It is a bummer that it's really the only one of its kind in the game. The rest is pretty straightforward action, but as I stated before, with a lot of variety. You'll go from avoiding the police, to having a race towards saving Jameson from Scorpion, to pursuing Venom, to fighting monsters on a speeding train. The game does have some pretty intense difficulty spikes here and there, which is its main flaw. Despite these moments, it still remains as an interesting and fun game to me. I'd love to try out the PS1 version at some point, because I'm sure, like so many others, it'll be an enhanced experience. directly compared to its N64 counterpart, but the N64 version still impresses me on a technical level though, featuring lots of voice acting, including narration provided by Stan Lee, and lots of little cutscenes here and there. Give it a try sometime. It's one of the great examples of an early licensed game in an era where that was not as common. Like with many of Nintendo's characters, I was first introduced to Kirby through Super Smash Bros. I know I rented Kirby 64 and loved it, but never beat it. Sometime later I would get my own copy. Although Kirby 64 is a simple game compared to other Kirby games, it has an undeniable charm to it and an excellent soundtrack. Couple that with some beautifully smooth cinematics and you have a wonderful little game. This footage you're seeing comes from our Retro Boost arcade playthrough of the Wii U Virtual Console version. In most Kirby games, Kirby has the ability to take enemy powers for himself. Some entries like Kirby Superstar feature full move sets for each power, others only feature one or two simple moves. Kirby 64 found a twist where you can combine abilities. Take fire. With the fire power, Kirby can rocket forward as a fireball. You can combine that with another fire enemy, and now you have an enhanced version, a bigger and longer fireball attack. This is the trend for doubling up on the same abilities. But wait, there's more. You can combine, say, electric and cutter to form a lightsaber, or bomb and cutter to form explosive shurikens. There are 35 combos in total. It's pretty fun to try and experiment with stuff you wouldn't normally give a shot to see what wild thing you get. Some of my favorites include the ice skates, lightsaber, and fire sword. The one downside is that with some exception, these abilities only have one move or action. The flame sword has the most with 3, slashing, throwing, and holding it up vertically. Most only have one. It would be cool to see this mechanic revisited in a future title, but with more depth. It's still a good time here though. Another highlight are the bosses. They are a delight to take on, mainly due to that awesome boss soundtrack. Miracle Matter was one of my childhood nemeses, taking me countless attempts to beat. Very interesting design choice for this boss, where you have to constantly trade out copy abilities, where up to that point, you were free to use whatever you want through the levels. You are still encouraged to experiment though, because if you want to beat the game 100%, you have to collect all the crystal shards, and using all the different combos at some point is required for that. That was something I didn't know for years. I adore this game. It remains one of my favorites of the Kirby franchise, despite its simplicity. It's just so charming. I love it. And I could listen to the soundtrack any day. Mario Kart 64. Need I say more? Well, I guess I should, so we're here after all. Mario Kart 64 was among the first few games I played on the system. First playing it at my aunt and uncle's house. I don't know at what point I had my own copy, but it probably wasn't long after that visit, because I recall having it for years prior to the time frame that I knew the GameCube was coming out. Out of all the N64 games, this one and 2 others I played the most. Even though I wasn't very good at Mario Kart as a kid, that didn't stop me from playing it non-stop. Mario Kart 64 is just plain fun. If anything, I love it now more as an adult. There is just something pure about it compared to the future's entries, which is funny because it isn't the original, but I think that this particular entry contains the right mix of iconic mechanics. The characters have basic stat differences set between light and heavy, mini turbos are done by flicking the stick, and you can hold items behind you defensively. Future entries would expand on the stats, featuring full-on vehicle building. Mini turbos would eventually become something that you do as the result of holding a drift versus flicking the stick, and some entries like Mario Kart Double Dash would change the item behavior and interaction regarding defense. Comparing Mario Kart 64 to others, it's like the raw element left over after you distill it. That's how I see it, at least. That's what makes this game so special to me. It's like a time capsule, but what is inside is still fun as hell. Original Mario Kart doesn't feel that way to me, probably because I didn't grow up with it. No hate, the game is also fun. All 16 tracks here are also just so great. There isn't a single one that I dread going through. Well, except maybe Bowser's Castle. That one can be tricky, but it feels rewarding to coast through without issues. The randomness of the items also seems perfectly tuned. You still get fun items in high positions, and most importantly, the spiny shell rips its way through the track, potentially striking more than just the first place racer. The only item that doesn't perform very optimally are the red shells. They shoot right at the next racer in a direct line, meaning that if that person is around a corner, the shell will just crash out. You need a direct line of sight for those. Rubber banding can also be an issue, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't fun to race defensively with the racers nipping at your heels. Mario Kart is a long-standing franchise. I've enjoyed each one that I played, but this one might be my favorite overall, a close tie at least to Double Dash, the other one that I played a ton of as a kid. I also had a lot of fun streaming this one, and we'll definitely do that again at some point. Super Smash Bros., another long-standing franchise, whose most recent entry impressed quite a bit. But here's how it all started. This game was an important one for me. It was the window that introduced me to so many other Nintendo franchises. Characters like Samus, Captain Falcon, Link, I first saw them here, and would later play their titles on the GameCube. I honestly can't remember if the first experience of like Star Fox and Pokemon was through Smash. And regarding Ness and DK, I had never owned any of their titles, mainly not due to having an SNES. You know, I was one generation before my youth, though I knew who DK was at that point just through word of mouth. With that said, since I initially didn't know who these characters properly were, I thought Samus was a robot fighter and Captain Falcon was some kind of fire-fueled superhero. I mostly played the single-player mode and the training mode as a kid. The single-player mode is iconic to me due to a number of highlight stages. Giant DK and Metal Mario would intimidate me, as did the Polygon team, usually because by that point I'd be on the edge of a game over. Beating that mode was always an achievement for me. I also enjoyed messing around with the training mode, spawning items, and just jumping around. My best character is probably Samus now. Nothing is more satisfying than landing those charge shots. Mechanically, Smash 64 is very simple, and unlike Mario Kart 64, I don't think that it's a classic distillation. There are just things that the sequels do better. So much so that it affects how I play Smash 64. There's no spot dodging, no air dodging, no side specials, no up throws, no charging attacks, the list goes on. I'm always trying to reflexively perform like all of those things, but it's still fun. It does have some killer stages. Hyrule's Castle, Saffron City, and the Mushroom Kingdom are some of my favorites in the whole franchise. I'm not a fan of the flat tournament style stuff, but I do love watching Smash tournaments, go figure. So I'd happily play this game anytime. Just like Mario Kart 64, super fun playing on stream. I'll definitely do it again. It was really hard to organize these games into a list. If I'm being honest, I think of this more like a tight gradient than a top 10. Most of the games are equally enjoyable to me on this list. What I'm getting at is that the closer to one we get, I don't necessarily hold the next title as being definitively superior to the previous. I did my best to organize it that way, but damn, it got hard going into the top 5. That said, number 1 will never change. Star Fox 64 is my absolute favorite N64 title. I was obsessed with this game as a kid, and still love playing it now. Star Fox 64 is such a blast. It's a thrilling on-rail shooter, uplifted further by its great and fun characters, snappy villains, and epic boss battles. I've found new life in this game as an adult by unlocking Expert Mode for the first time, bringing with it a whole new experience to be had. It just keeps on giving. This game is magic. It's just so good that it can never be topped. The franchise went into a tailspin that it never recovered from afterward. Star Fox Assault was the next attempt at similar gameplay, but it just lacked something. 64 is just more fun. It's funny as it is, because surface level it's quite simple. As an on-rail shooter, you just go forward. They nailed it though. You take control of Fox McCloud, piloting the R-Wing, on planets and in space, going after enemies and bosses in aerial combat. You can upgrade your main lasers, use homing charge shots and screen clearing bombs, plus use loops and spins to avoid enemies or deflect attacks. There's even a first person mode. Like, what the hell is that? That's an incredible bonus to feature. Like, wow. The R-Wing can also have its wings blown off, affecting your maneuverability. There is just so much detail here. One playthrough is pretty short, like 30 to 45 minutes, but it's designed to be replayed. There are 3 distinct paths to advance to, easy to hard, but you can cross them and mix them up by finding secret warps or by beating certain objectives and getting a good ending for them. A good example of this is Katina. On Katina, if you successfully defeat the boss in time, the character Bill will appear and help you on the next level you visit. If you make sure that that next level is Sector X, he'll help you with the warp gate that takes you to Sector Z. One of my favorites is on Macbeth, where you can optionally cause the boss to crash his train into an ammunition depot, causing an insane explosion. The most iconic boss fight, though, has to be with Starwolf, the evil squad of mercenaries with their own deadly fighter ships. This is where Star Fox switches to an all-range mode, which features dogfights between ships, where you leverage loops and U-turns to evade and set yourself up for strikes against your opponent. When I was a kid, the second fight against Starwolf, where they have improved crafts, was one of the hardest things I ever faced, and got countless game overs there. The final sequence of the game features a battle against Andross, followed by a Metroid-style escape sequence that has no business being as genuinely epic as it is. Then, surprisingly, an ending cutscene where you see the crew walking around. I thought that was so cool as a kid, because prior to that, you only see their heads and their R-Wings. It makes them feel more real as characters. These characters are so timeless, and I should have mentioned that earlier. They are just really likable. Fox is the serious but also snappy leader, dropping the occasional one-liner with his confident bravado. Falco is the hot-headed ace pilot, quick to hurl insults at friend and foe alike, but still a loyal wingman. Slippy is the silly engineer, who is the least capable pilot, but supplies the team and maintains them with his technology, providing the role of revealing the boss health. He is the one wingman that you actually lose a feature by not having with you. Finally, Peppy, the wise old man, having served with Fox's father in the past, provides advice but also takes note of Fox's skill compared to his father, proud to see how Fox has grown. I mentioned losing them earlier. They have their own health bars, and if they fall to 0, they are forced out of the mission and mixed the next one due to repairs. When you don't have a teammate, their dialogue is missing, and for Slippy, that means you don't see the boss's health bar. That is just another cool feature of the game that makes your teammates feel more important. Believe it or not, it is way more fun to have them talking versus total silence. They're likable, they're funny, like it's a cool thing in the game to have so much voice acting in it. Expert mode, by the way, really hard, super fun. We're probably going to do another video on that for Ultra Boost Arcade because I would like to beat the hard path with it. We left it off on the easy path, so here's hoping. We're going to do that at some point, for sure. I will beat it. It will happen. In summary, this is one of the greatest action games ever made. It is timeless. Give it a play if you haven't already. See if you can conquer expert mode. And here's hoping that Star Fox comes back at some point, at least as good as the 64 game is. They just haven't been able to top themselves. They peaked. We'll see. Hopefully that changes. Thanks for joining me as I talked about some of my favorite N64 games. It was fun to revisit some of the ones I haven't seriously played in a long time, namely Excitebike. This was a very hard video to make, mainly due to the fact that I just didn't have many N64 games as a kid. It was important to me that I picked games from back then. As others I experienced later in life, I need more time to stew on. Titles like Diddy Kong Racing, which I barely played as a kid, but dove into for the first time seriously last year, and really enjoyed it. If you're wondering where titles like Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and so on were, well, I got Mario 64 specifically pretty late in the N64's lifespan, so in my memory, Sunshine and Galaxy tend to overshadow it. If this was a top 11, it'd probably be on that list. As far as Zelda goes, I played Ocarina for the first time on GameCube, so in my mind, it's like a GameCube favorite game and not an N64 one. I've also never played Majora's Mask. Controversial, I know. I rented it, I had a brief rental with it, and was very confused by it, I couldn't figure it out. I mean, I was probably just too young for it, to be honest. I should go back to it though. Paper Mario also was one that I never owned as a kid and only ever played at a friend's house briefly, but that was in my teens. So I was never exposed to it as a young kid. And I love that game. Playing it on the Wii's Virtual Console. It's a great game. And I never even owned F-Zero X. So a lot of those franchises like Metroid, F-Zero, Zelda, that was like GameCube and forward to me. So if I were to do a GameCube or like a PS3 list, it'd be really hard for the opposite reason as this, because the pool of games to choose from would be way, way larger. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I'd be curious to know what some of your favorite N64 games. Throw them in the comments, please. Also on the Discord server as well, we talk about this stuff too. And I will see you on the next one.